think it's also, visual culture. It's where kids today are not even, are not, are relate to a screen or screen-based culture as being a fixed
Yeah.
part of their lives that is not extrinsic.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not because we're all self-publishing,
Mm.
um, the way we digest entertainment on a screen is not so passive. So, we're kind of, that curse when you're a composer, suddenly you listen to music in the sense of like, how was it made?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
almost the appreciation of music. And now that we're all self-publishing and making video content, it changes the way you digest, like an hour and a half or 3 hour Kubrick movie is a kind of strange kind of torture, probably because it's so dense.
Well, I mean, look, for me, the torture is out of date technology, to be honest. Like, I think like
Yes.
the most frustrating films are the ones that, or series are the ones where they have flip phones, and then the the cops are talking about triangulating someone's location, and you just think it's called GPS. It's called GPS. No, but anyway, so you and
Yeah.
I have had a conversation about art for the last 10 years, I think. I think it's about, so in the same way that the screen is incorporated in the lives of the younger generation, that is as an integral part, I think our lives are incorporated in the conversation about art and
Yeah.
not the way around, which is why I was, because I was trying to understand, what is exactly the element that shapes our particular, friendship and conversation. And for me, it is this absolutely overwhelming kind of love for art and love for painting and I just that
Yeah.
it's kind of love that loves you back, that where it's not personal, it's not actually personal to either one of us, and
Yeah.
we share in that warmth, and it is it's a very, very special kind of feeling that,
Mm.
in some ways we wanted to, I guess, share that circle of love that's kind of how I see. I know it sounds super, super new
No,
age,
I'm
super,
with you on that. I think
super,
that's
dating us through to the 70s, but at the same time, it's also something very apropos this particular moment in contemporary visual culture that is so seduced by the material, right? And
yeah,
we'll say we don't know, we know how it feels. And
yeah.
we don't have to make it more tangible or less tangible than that, So that's kind of
No, I'm with you. That's a beautiful resonance to have permeate the whole conversation and the conversations we have with other people as well.
so I'm
Yeah.
going to tell you how we first met. This is how we first met. I remember exactly. So this is going to sound really weird. I was wearing a pair of, I would like to say, crocodile or leather skin patent leather pants, or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. And it was
Seems likely.
yeah. And it was the Joburg Art Fair 2015, and you just popped in to pick up some works by Wycliffe and Gresham that
Mm.
we had brought for you for the show at Hazard. And then
Yeah.
it was a very fleeting meeting, and then we agreed that we're going to have breakfast, like I
Mm.
think the day after the fair, something like a Monday, and you gave me the place, and I'd like to, I think it was in Maboneng, right, someplace. And then I remember distinctly, and this is a cultural moment, because I remember you coming up to the counter to order, avocado and toast, and I said, what are you doing ordering my breakfast? And he said, you said, this is my breakfast. But the extraordinary thing is that you're ordering a breakfast at a place that wasn't making coffee. And then we had to go to another place that actually
Uh,
made coffee, which was
wow.
very, very odd. This is,
Yeah.
very processional, because the two things have to do, with avocado toast
And
and
coffee.
coffee. And, and art, and those things are all important.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it's the triangle of divinity. Yeah.
yeah, no, well, I mean, and then at some point in the conversation, and I don't remember, and this is the other thing is that, when you meet people, the things that stand out for you are not necessarily the things that stand out for them. But for me, it was like, I'm sure we're discussing logistics of the show and something, and then you said at some point that you said something like, I think it's obvious how much I would like to work with you, and I was like, is it? And I was like, oh well, this is fascinating and really, really good, so let's, I'm all about spontaneity. I was sold on avocado toast. You had me at avocado toast. That was,
Yeah.
so
Do you know what? I remember I feel like I met you before I met you because the conversations we had leading up to the collecting the works um gave me a completely different feeling to the kind of conversation I was having with people in the art world. And I'd sort of helicoptered myself into the other side of the curtain. I'd been practicing as an artist for all those years and then suddenly was running this gallery and felt a combination of like imposter syndrome, possibly in a good way, and also slight shock at the kind of shenanigans that go on in the art world and the lack of transparency and the lack of directness and honesty. I'm not saying it's across the board, but it was just a strange feeling to be in this world that didn't appear to be as it appeared from the outside. And it was cowboy territory as well, Joburg, and trying to find some kind of way of showing work that felt polished and professional, but also had that energy, that you don't want to stamp out. So I think I met you before I even met you, just the way the energy that you kind of put out and the enthusiasm that you had for your painters made me feel as a painter, like here's someone who gets painting, who champions the right things. So yeah, I mean, I think I do remember seeing the leopard print leather trousers, and that was 100% confirmation of everything I felt.
I can't find them anymore. I don't know. I've got other leather pants, obviously, but
Yeah. And in the context of an art fair where everyone's trying to appear chic, you appeared badass, which felt the right tone to be setting.
always
Um,
the right tone. But do you think it's really interesting, that as an artist, you feel an outsider in the art market? I think you're just kind of hitting on a very
it's a
poignant
strange reality.
moment
Yeah. Yeah.
there. I think that's something that is, people kind of brush over, is that,
Yeah.
and it's a different world, and not necessarily in a good way.
Yeah, it seems to exist in parallel. I mean, in some ways, the art market has nothing to do with art. And that's a strange statement to make, but it's actually quite a helpful reality to accept as an artist that if you sort of start with that understanding, it removes a lot of the pain and sort of turmoil that might come in your own trying to kind of accommodate something which for you as an artist might appear it's kind of unformed and maybe sacred to you, or at least deeply meaningful, and then you're throwing it into a world which is feels very different. That room that you're putting it into doesn't feel like the room that it was made in. Um, and it's helpful, I think, to first understand that those are two very different rooms. But if you don't get that, uh, I certainly didn't get it fully before I started running my own space and working with collectors and art fairs and other galleries and so on. I also ended up at the end of that process with a lot more empathy for the art world, because it's so complicated and there's so many factors fighting against you being able to actually just connect a collector with an artwork that they love. So I do have sympathy slash empathy, but in the beginning it was a shock, and it was great to find a lifeboat like you in that world.
Oh, or sharks. Thank you. I mean, I always say that we're, the art world is an abattoir masquerading as a patisserie, you know.
So, I mean, for
But
sure,
it
yeah.
really is an abattoir. I don't have any other words for it. It's a blood
It's a
sport.
visual picture. It's definitely a bloodbath, that's for sure.
But I also I think we're on a spectrum of but I think actually what you're saying is that because once you paradigm and silo it, like the studio is one kind of a sacred space, and
Yeah.
the art world is one kind of a spectacle and a circus,
Mm.
shall we say, and then in some ways when you transition the artwork's life to an auction, it's a form of pure theater in its own say. So if you
Yeah,
then
sure.
none of them and only one of them requires a living breathing person to in the spirit of the artist to be relevant, and in fact that's the studio. And
Yeah.
and yeah, and those are, and the artist's position is, also like, ultimately the most fragile and vulnerable one, but also the most powerful one, ultimately, because it's a space of
Mm.
pure agency, whereas we're like in the
Yeah.
art world, we're all on the receiving end of something, and we are
Mm.
everything we do is contingent on outside forces, right? We're, as
Yeah.
opposed to
Yeah.
the artist who's not. So it's kind of, and I think, this is the conversation also, is to understand the, I guess the ultimate agency. And I think, like, for me at this time and at this place, I think it's important to have conversations about agency in every space. Is how can we, because how can we be proactive in a world where a lot of us are feeling disempowered or unable to change the way things work. And I think,
Yeah.
having conversations that say, well, this is who we are, because the phrase that I come back to like very frequently right now in my life is, people who don't know who they are don't know what to do. And so in order to answer, in order to know what to do, who you need to know who you
Yeah.
are. But in a lot of people that I speak to, they actually have lost a sense of who they are, because even the notion of identity has been so politicized and segmented that is self-knowledge even possible? And yet know thyself is, like, we're not even connecting with, ancient wisdoms are sort of lost
Yeah.
in popular,
Definitely
uh,
time
yeah.
for some, there's definitely a need for some kind of direct contact with ancient wisdom, but not in a kind of cerebral sense, in the sense that it's useful. And I think we speak a lot about the power of these ancient works of genius artworks. I mean, sometimes ancient can be like yesterday. Some
Mm.
works have a feeling that resonate with a kind of universal ancientness.
Time is
Um,
a construct. Time does not exist.
yeah, yeah. It's so somehow that when you talk about the artist having agency or having significance, that kind of significant artwork, it's not even so much the artist, it's the work that comes through them that's able to happen because of the work they've done on themselves and the work they've done in their studio and their own kind of ability to be vulnerable and useful on a kind of higher sense. Those works are what makes certainly what makes me want to make work, but also makes the kind of works that make me want to be alive. You know, they give me that uh, sense of joy and positivity in a time when that's quite a rare commodity. You know,
And
yeah,
no, I well, and sense of freedom as well, right?
yeah,
Ultimately,
yeah,
why do we exist? Because I also feel that attachment to a moment, or attachment to like to things, to any to any sense of fear or any sense of the political in some ways, is not only transient, it's also some kind of a limitation. The way that I have an interesting kind of just a small art story, is that a lot of
Yeah.
people self-censor when they look at art because they don't have the experience. And my position was always, as you know, is that art is for everyone. Art is not some,
Yeah.
art is that imparts to us and empowers us, not through interpretation, but through opening your heart. And so we just started a new project, and there's, one of the paintings that we put there is in this project at a hotel of all things, like, as I said, so you would imagine that this is a fairly non-spiritual, materialistic environment. And we've had now 2 experiences where people who are completely announce themselves as having no background, stopped in front of one particular artwork and were mesmerized. One person broke into tears. Now,
Wow.
yeah, and weirdly, I mean, and I've seen several people with the same artwork. Now, weirdly, me as somebody who has, like, a lifetime or more of experience with artwork, that work is just not my vibe, right? It's not for me. But my observation is that it has a stunning impact on people where they're just completely mesmerized, and then they have this conversation with me as saying, I don't know anything about art, but this work,
What
this
is it?
this grabs me, this takes me, I can't stop looking at it. And it's actually quite a minimal work that doesn't have any now. And the people, they're not asking for stories, they're not asking for the artist's background, they're crying, and
Yeah.
this is, and I think this is where it's at. This is the job of art. I mean, I'm not saying everyone should cry, but it
No.
helps. But
You said something really interesting, and that was all interesting to me. But the bit that leapt out for me was about the heart. The ability to melt the heart, and it's almost as if that's the primary function of art. To melt the heart, particularly where that ability has been lost, or that kind of connection to that the possibility of your heart being melted has been kind of locked away in some room and you're in a kind of chamber. So, but it is strange. I mean, they speak about like Rothko, whose work, if you analyze it, as a kind of art critic, if you like, it's quite difficult, as it's minimal, there's very little figurative kind of direction. But people who have almost no background or no background at all in art will go and just weep, in front of those paintings in the at the Tate Modern. Same with Van Gogh's Starry, Starry Night, or the
but not
sunflower.
but not the immersive experience. No. I don't know.
So
Did anyone cry
that's
at
a
the
really
immersive
interesting
experience?
point. Yeah, no, that's it. I went to that immersive experience. They brought it on a sort of caravan, a kind of edited version of it. They brought it to Edinburgh, and I did go with an open mind. I mean, I tried to, let's put it that way.
Mm.
And it was in a kind of tent in a square in front of the Sheraton Hotel.
Circus. It's
Um,
definitely a circus act.
it was a circus, yeah. And I went in, and they had all of his a lot of his quotes being beamed on different walls, and these paintings of his blasted on a huge scale, and it was quite impressive, and I was thinking, if you didn't know much about the guy's work, and this would be a good entry. And there was one point where there's a kind of mirrored room with multiple sunflowers, and you could take a selfie as if you're in a sunflower field, and the sunflowers weren't real sunflowers, and the paintings weren't real paintings, and the quotes were kind of blown up, and it got more and more irritating, to the point where I was like physically desperate to look at one of the originals. It gave me this kind of, when you've eaten too many sweets,
Mm.
like peach flavored sweets, and
I like
it's almost as if there's this ancient memory of what an actual peach tastes like.
there's a gray wall behind you, and it looks
Yeah.
exactly like something that you virtually engineer. Do you know what I mean?
So I'm sitting in my living room in Edinburgh, and outside is a little garden, cobbled streets, and this
So
is a beautiful little teeny painting that I you can't see it, the reflection, but it's I bought it you know that artist support pledge, um and I got it in during that. It's just an absolute masterpiece. Richard Devereux, he made a beautiful big stone artwork. David Bowie featured it in his film on public art. I mean, that's a big shout out.
that's super cool.
Although I'll admit, I did add a little paper to add extra bounce to my face.
Oh God, you have.
I know what I'm doing. You see, look, it's got
Yeah,
its
I
little
know
bell.
the cool bananas. I'm off to do random stuff like grocery.
Amazing.
All right, have a
Catch
great
you
day, man.
later.
All right, ciao.
Cheers, mate. Bye.